Today, we're diving into the gritty and gripping world of a soldier's life during the monumental Napoleonic Wars through the pages of The Diary of a Napoleonic Foot Soldier. This rare glimpse is penned by a real foot soldier, Jakob Walter, who marched with Napoleon himself. Let's begin. The campaign of 1806 and 1807. In the year 1806, I was drafted with many of my comrades into military service in the conscription at that time and was assigned to the regiment of Romig, which afterward was given the name of Francomont and of Number 4 and which was in the Ludwigsburg Garrison. In the fall, I traveled with the regiment to Prussia in the campaign which Emperor Napoleon with the princes, then his allies, was conducting at that time against Prussia. In the fall, we marched through Ellwangen, Nuremberg, Ansbach, Bayreuth, Plauen, Dresden, and Saxony, then through Bunzlau into Gross-Glogau in Silesia, where we remained in garrison for about 3 weeks. During a period from the month of January to the month of March, I had to go with half of the regiment to accompany several convoys of captured Prussians from Glogau back through Crossen, Frankfurt on the Oder, and Dresden, where we were relieved. We were given good quarters everywhere, which kept me always healthy and cheerful in spite of the continuous marching. Furthermore, I was only 19 years old, a fact which caused me frequently to participate in thoughtless and dangerous enterprises. During our return to Glogau, the convoy, together with a Bavarian corps, was surrounded by Prussians in Bunzlau. We then closed all the gates and caught the spies. In this city, it happened in my quarter that a comrade wanted to force the landlord to sing. However, he refused to do so, sitting the whole night on a bench near the stove weeping. Since this man could not sing because of his sorrow, Soldier Hummel wanted to frighten him, took his rye, cocked the hammer, and shot. The bullet passed by me and another soldier and lodged in the wall. I wanted to mention this in order to show how the soldiers were running wild at that time. A spy who was a village smith was brought before the guardhouse. He had letters and orders to tell the Prussians of our strength in manpower. He was laid on a bench and whipped by 2 or 3 corporals. 2 men had to hold his feet and 2 his head. His leather breeches were stretched out and water poured on them, and then he received about 150 blows. At last he could no longer speak, because he was half dead. At every blow the lieutenant said to the smith, "This is a Bavarian thaler, this is a Württemberg thaler," at which the lieutenant was really able to laugh. After this experience, the smith was taken to the threshing floor and shot. Blows with clubs also were heaped upon many innocent people in this city. When the Prussians who were laying siege to the city lost their courage, they withdrew, and we entered Glogau again. After I had been in Glogau one day, I had to escort with a part of the regiment 19 money wagons to the Grand Army. These money wagons were drawn by 4 and 6 horses, and many sank into the mire every day. This march went through Breslau and then across the Polish border to Kalisz, Posen, Gnießen, Inor Azlav, and Thorn on the Vistula River, where the convoy was given over. From there we had to return to Gnießen, a sizable city in Poland. There we had a storeroom to guard, watching in a room at a bright fire. In this house, there was a Polish soldier's wife who taught me as much Polish as I would need. We suffered from the cold a great deal there during the 2 weeks of our stay because our feet got no warmth and a severely cold winter prevailed. Finally, 8 men, including myself, were sent into the outlying villages by the commandant of the city. I received several written orders to requisition food supplies, yet, even though I did not know the roads, I was not furnished with a guide. Since I had to carry out my commission, I went, as did my other comrades, into the Jewish section, where everyone spoke German, but few could read or write it, and few, as I found out, could read Polish. There I wanted to take the first Jew I came across as a guide, but the first escaped, and likewise the others I chased. Finally, I ran after one and chased him into the attic of his house and caught him among many women and children. Here he wanted to defend himself, and I had to use force. I took him, dragged him down the 2 flights of stairs, and had to hold him by the coat and kick him forward for 2 hours, threatening him if he should fail to lead me to the right village. Here I had to walk through a lake, and the water went over my knees. I commanded the Jew to lead the way, and he howled so loudly for fear of drowning that I had to laugh and send him back immediately. After crossing, the Jew sat down and shook out his water-filled boots. After I arrived in the village ahead of me, the nobleman quartered me in the mayor's house, but when I entered the room through a straw door, I could not stand upright and could not see any people for the smoke. This compelled me to quarter myself at the nobleman's house. The next day I tried to visit 8 villages, but I frequently got to only 1 or 2 in a day, for often it was necessary to walk a distance of 3 or 4 miles. In one manner I once could get no guide, since everyone ran away and hid from my lone self. A big dog also kept attacking me, and I shot the dog because of my customary youthful impulses. This was another reason why I got no guide. Here I traveled alone, depending upon my own good judgment, to a village in another region, and received here, as almost everywhere, unrequested presents which pleased me very much. Since, as I have said, it required 8 days instead of 4 to visit the villages, and since the convoy lying in Garrison left hurriedly, I and 3 other men returned too late. The convoy was gone. Having obtained the route of march from Garrison to the Nice stronghold in Silesia, we had to march alone a distance of about 100 hours. Since we 4 men thought we were well off, we did not hurry to catch the convoy, but contented ourselves with comfortable traveling. We visited the noblemen, who usually had to hitch up their own good horses for us, while we threatened that we had to catch the convoy by the next day, and that the noblemen could be made responsible if we missed it. However, we usually had to combine force with these methods to get horses. Once we took 4 horses from a nobleman, and unfortunately the march led us through a large government city, Posen. Here the servant said something we could not understand to a few burghers, but we were not stopped. We wanted to drink some brandy in the last suburb, and we halted. At once the nobleman came up on a white horse, being a Polish general stationed there in Garrison. Our position did not seem to be the best, and we had to discuss what was to be done. Quickly, our sickest-looking comrade had to lie on the ground and continually moan and lament. The general greeted us by threatening to write to our headquarters in Silesia about such use of his horses. That might have happened if the sick man had not aroused some serious doubt on the part of the general. To defend ourselves further, we said we had just as much right to complain to our regiment that His Excellency the General had hindered our progress and had caused the death of a sick man. At these words, a wagon with 2 horses was brought there at once, and we were able to travel away laughing with our healthy, sick man. After Posen, we came into a little Polish town called Fraustadt, which was a garrison town. I have to mention this town because of its windmills, which numbered 99. From Fraustadt we came after several marches to Glogau on Easter Eve and were quartered with a Jew. Since we were acquainted in this city, we wanted to give this Jew something to remember us by. The meals were usually attended by violence on account of stinginess and uncleanliness. And, since clean chinaware was always set up for the Jews, we took over all that chinaware and ate with it, causing such an uproar in the house that a crowd of people gathered in front of the house to listen. Our defense was that we just had not thought of making anything unkosher that had been intended not to be for us, and so the Jews could not set forth any complaint. From Glogau we traveled with some of the Black Riemen toward the stronghold of Schweidnitz. We had not obtained a wagon out of Glogau, which seemed to us a great hardship. It was Easter Day, March 29th, and we looked for horses in every stable in a village called Hochkirch, but found none, which failure made it necessary for us to look even in the parsonage. When we searched the buildings and found nothing but an old woman there, we wanted to look into the church where the service was in progress, and we found the church full of people. Meanwhile, there stood in the court a beautiful carriage hitched with 2 horses, so we untied the horses and rode away without a servant. Since we had to hurry to escape the church folk, I had to drive and ran into a tree stump so that the carriage and all of us lay there in the mud. Here we set out again and traveled until we were a half-mile from Schweidnitz. In that place there was a tavern in the forest, and after we had sold the carriage and horses cheaply to the innkeeper, we continued our march. When we came to the fortress of Nice, we had to go on with our regiment and with the Second Regiment through Breslau, across Poland through the city of Kalisz, then Posen, Gnesen, Inower Aslav, and Thorn on the Vistula River. From there we went through Prussian Pomerania toward the fortress of Kolberg on the Baltic Sea. 1 mile from this stronghold is a town called Belgard, and there was a castle there which had belonged to our King Frederick while he had encamped in this town as general of the cavalry. On this journey from Thorn to Kolberg, I saw a lake which lay in a forest by a monastery. In this lake were multitudes of frogs which were of a very beautiful bright blue color, and no soldier would quit until he had caught one of these beautiful frogs. Beyond this region, we came to a little town in which the largest part of the inhabitants were Jews. The same day we had had to walk several miles through swamps and snow water up to our knees, and when quarters were taken there for the evening, I and 4 other men came into a Jew's house. The room was full of straw and goats. Since neither fire nor wood was to be had, we went into the next house to lodge, looked for the Jew, and took him into custody, for only by applying such stern treatment could we induce the wife to bring us food on her husband's account. While we were besieging the fortress of Kolberg, we were assigned to camp in a swampy place. Since wood and even straw were rarely to be had, the barracks were built from earth and sod, and ditches were dug around them. As some sickness was arising because of the continual fog, I also became sick and had to go to the hospital in the fortress of Stettin, which is also a fortress on the sea. When I arrived with several from the regiment, we were placed 3 stories high under the roof in the hospital. Here 12 to 15 of the men about me died every day, which made me sick at my stomach and would have caused my death in the end if I and 4 comrades had not reported ourselves as being well even on the 2nd day and escaped. This hospital and 3 others, according to rumor, had 6,000 sick people, and that was the reason also why everyone with an appetite had to suffer great hunger, which was one of the things that moved me to leave. The 3rd day, we 5 men were allowed to go, and we traveled without delay to our regiment. In this fortress of Stettin, the Würzburg soldiers were stationed and were all dressed in uniforms of white and red, that is, like Austrian soldiers. This stronghold had a position which could be besieged only by land from the side facing Berlin. Here the Oder River flows into the Baltic Sea. This, together with the swamps which extend for a mile and through which currents of the Oder Au surrounds 2/3 of the city. Over the swamp is a paved dike, a mile long, reaching to the head of the bridge near a village named Dam. This city is large and beautiful, and had especially large merchant ships in the harbor to look at. When we 5 men came again without delay to the fortress of Kolberg, we had the honor of enduring the siege in good health for another 3 weeks. Pentecost night is especially fixed in my memory since the fortress was stormed then. When we had to leave camp after midnight, all the regiments marched forward through the swamp, and nally, when light firing began upon the outposts, we were commanded to attack by wading through the rampart ditches with fascines, to tread these in, and to scramble up the outworks by chopping and shoveling. When I stood in the ditch, each first soldier had to pull up the next one with his rifle. The ramparts were of sand, and everyone frequently fell back again because of the attack of the enemy, or just because of the sliding sand. Yet in that place the huge cannonballs flew by above us, thundering so violently that we would have believed the earth would burst to pieces. When everyone was almost on top of the earthwork, the Prussians were slaughtered with great vigor, and the rest took flight into the gate. Then we too wanted to gain possession of the gateway in order to enter the city, but at this critical time, many of these Prussians were shot along with our men by small and large guns, and the gate was closed. Since all sorts of shells and rockets broke out of the fortress like a cloudburst, we had to take to flight. Those who meanwhile were scrambling up the outworks had to jump from the fortress into the moat along with their prisoners, and all the rest had to do likewise. During this retreat, many fell on bayonets, many drowned, and many of us were also brought into the fortress as prisoners and sent away to Danzig by sea. When we reached camp, we saw many who had lost their helmet, rifle, saber, knapsack, etc. Because of various falls and pains, many looked for wounds and had none. Many, however, did not become aware of the wounds which they had until they reached camp.